Welcome back to Hobbit Racing. Smokey's joining me trackside again at the race director's desk. Today we're going behind the scenes a little bit, not in too much detail, but we're going to exchange a power supply, and I'll give you a quick rundown of the wiring cabinet, the way that I set it up, and we'll just go through some particulars about what I'm doing here in this particular case, because I have 4 power supplies that we deal with. So without further ado, Smokey, let's go ahead and get to it. So there's the board. There's the electronics behind the track right there. There's far more to it than that. There's wire management going everywhere. But we're in a position where some of these power supplies, we have 4 independent power supplies, 1 per lane, so that there's never any interruption or any concern, even though you could certainly get away with a track, maybe even as upwards as 4 lanes by having maybe a couple of lanes, or maybe even the whole thing powered by 1 power supply. But I prefer, based on what was passed on to me by the War Eagle River track from Scott Culp, and what I've taken over here, to be consistent in the approach. And what happens to these over the course of time is there's analog to digital conversion here, right? And so you've got diodes, you've got dials and other things that are going on. And what happens is the dials eventually give out over time. And what happens is we run the track at 9.5 volts at Hobbit Racing Park. And when you end up starting to have one fail on you, as you turn the power, say it starts to drift upwards, as you use the fine adjustment and start to go downwards, as I'll show you in a minute, you might think you've reached 9.5, and then you go up on the track to run some laps, and next thing you know, you're creeping to 9.4, 9.3, 9.2, and then subsequently you come back over and you dial the fine adjustment back to 9.5, run a few more laps, and then next thing you know, you've crept to 9.6, 9.7, 9.8. Well, that's obviously no good for a number of reasons. Whether you're testing, number one, that's not going to help you learn anything about your car from a performance standpoint, especially when it comes to dialing in the sensitivity and the brake potentiometers on the Professor motor controllers that we use here. Worse, you can't do that during a race, right? The race director's job is to make sure that we're all having fun, but that we're all having fair play at the same time as that, right? It's competitive, but it's for fun. So at the end of the day, in any racing situation, you cannot give an unfair advantage in one lane and then adjust it after that heat and then say, oh, well, I fixed it and it's all set, when that person may have gotten a more unfair advantage. So let's power up. So case in point, there you go. We're powered back up. And as you can see, the red lane is already giving us trouble. The red lane is the biggest trouble right now. Blue and yellow have already been replaced upon the resurrection, the relocation of this track, and then the subsequent redesign of all the wire management and all the wiring that I have put together for the wiring cabinet here. Green is also starting to fail. And listen, Amazon right here, 15% off, and the more you buy, the more discount you get. So we've got 2 more to go in. So I will show you what I was talking about right here. And then the other thing also that is very frustrating about these when they start to fail on you is you will lose the ability to do any fine adjustments. I'm going down and watch the dial go up. I'm literally turning that down and the voltage is going up instead. And then the only way to get the reaction to work is flicking it. If you flick it a few times, then maybe you'll get it to come back down. And I don't think there's any value in wasting time on the video here, but trust me, as I just turned it down, if we walked away, maybe I'll pause it here for a second and see if I can show you that it's going to continue to creep downward. Well, that was only about a 5-second pause, and we've already crept down to 9.3. So again, you can see the unfair advantage. And to be perfectly honest, the differences perhaps between running at 9.3 versus 9.7 volts, depending on which direction it's starting to creep, might not seem like a big deal. But for those of you that are still learning, or for those of you that know, choking out the voltage is actually a legitimate thing in Slotcar racing. Now, there are some places that let you completely modify the car and completely, from a professional standpoint, modify your ability to control that car on the track. Because when you actually have the ability to choke the voltage down, as long as you have the proper torque in your motor and a good gear ratio, you actually have better control of your car the lower the voltage is. So when we talk about this in a wall wart situation, perhaps on plastic tracks at your 12, 14, 15.8 volts, there's nothing you can do about that unless you're choking the voltage down somewhere else. But on a commercial track, the voltages can be, anywhere from 10, 12, possibly 14 volts. But then when you plug your controllers in, if you have the ability to choke the voltage out, if it's allowed, you get better control. So no circumstances at Hobbit Racing Park, as you just watched it continue to creep at 9.2, we need fair across the board. Every lane is at 9.5, and there is no ability to allow the controller situation. Professor Motor controllers with the ones that I have, they do not have anything that allows you to choke the voltage out. So we run fairly at 9.5 volts. So we'll just give a quick review here, though, in case anybody's interested. So what you've got again here is you've got the TrackMate card, first and foremost, and I probably should have brought a pointer with me to start with. Good old Mr. Sharpie will be our pointer. You have the TrackMate card, and what you have going on here is a relatively simple approach, and yet it's also eloquent because it does exactly what you would expect it to do. This right here, this Cat5 cable is actually split 8 ways inside of it, and there are the infrared lights that actually go to the underside of the track, not the gantry, the underside of the track. And so there is a positive and negative in each LED infrared light. Sorry, LED light, I'll be okay. In each infrared light, so you've got an 8 split inside of there, and there's a wiring code that Daniel will give you from TrackMate that'll tell you which one is inherently when you plug in the software for, however you're assigning your colors and things like that. This is your communication back to your computer. USB, I guess A to B, that's old USB, but it's still fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And oh, by the way, you do have the capabilities to expand to 8 lanes right there on the other port, on the other LAN port. And then you need to power your card. So that's 12 volts powering the card right there from a wall wart converter that's just holding you at 12 volts. And then right here is where you have your interruption. This is where you have your call buttons, your call switch. So Daniel's system comes with usually one overarching call button that you can have a marshal press the track button. But what we have here is we have 4 individual call buttons, one at each Professor Motor controller that is actually plumbed in line on the plastic controller. Relatively simple to show you here. Simply just wired up the side of the controller here, and then we have the ability to start and stop the TrackMate system from right there, of course, along with the brake and the sensitivity. The nice part about this is it's just, some parallel wiring where necessary and in-series wiring where necessary. And in this case, we're just combining everything in a hub, and the output is what's coming back to stop the entire track, but the input is where all of these tie together so that no matter who hits the call button, because they figured out they wrecked first, right? If you're the driver of the car that wrecked, then you're going to know before anybody else that you wrecked, and you press the button, you'll kill power to the entire track all at once. So as long as your relays are in good working order, there's every reason to believe that you can be running independent powered lanes and independent action for controlling the track. And again, that saves you from marshalling in a home racing situation that we have here on mine. There are 2 sides of the track that you could never possibly get to marshal and allow the race to continue running time. Up here, we have all the positive and negative connections. Green and yellow are up here. Red and blue are up here. And you've got some nice help here in case you have a break in the action, as an electrical break in the action. And capacitors will end up resetting the system. In theory, right, it's all low voltage. So when types of things like this happen, from time to time, people will, in a commercial track setting, plug in their DeFalco or Professor Motor or Slotcar controller or other incorrectly. And then in theory, because there's resistors and capacitors and things built into these, as long as you unplug them, let them rest for a while, turn off the power, turn the power back on, things usually save themselves. So, you've got lots of protection built into place here, and you can see if you're familiar with wiring, and maybe we'll do another video, even though there's wonderful tools out there already from Slotcar Corner and other that have more than covered the 3-position wiring for the brake and the two that run the wiper for the acceleration sensitivity on the controllers. But so I'm not going to run into too much detail up here, but know that obviously you have, you've got the red, which is the brake, you've got the black, which is the positive. So it's a little bit opposite maybe for some of you that maybe did car stereo stuff back in the day, and that's okay. You could have chose purple, green, and orange wires. As long as you knew which ones were the two positive wires and which one was the negative wires, that's really all that matters. So, you can see here again, the white wires coming through, those are the ones that connect so that when you pull the wiper blade, you have two positives up there, and then you actually have one negative batch that's wrapped around that is the negative that is on the DC wiring. So that's kind of a quick overview of the wiring, not to say that that was any schematic representation. Give a shout out to Marty Ford on the schematics there. For those of you that know the schematic, the schematics. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn off red, and we're going to start taking it apart here. And while we're there, we might as well take a look at the positive and negative, and we will figure out whether or not we have any issue to deal with in terms of cleaning them. You're not going to find too much issue in a low voltage situation, but and I replaced most of these. So, you can always just take a look. And in this particular case, we do have negative coming in with the striped, so it shouldn't be a problem for me to disconnect either one of these in theory and let them get mixed up, right? So now we're really behind the scenes, or I guess you could say we are under the scenes. There's just one of our many surge protectors under here. And you can see now we're behind the cabinet. In fact, I'll give you a little bit, speaking of behind the scenes, as I promised, we'll give you a little bit of a shot of the underside of some of the wire management. In fact, we're in such a good place that it's worthwhile to review the underside of the gantry. You see all those colored wires right there? Those colored wires are your yellow lane, red lane, blue lane, and green lane. So in this particular case, the blue and white is the yellow lane, green and white is red, red and white is blue, and then orange and white is the outside green lane. And then all of these conglomerate wires, the two packs of the green and black that are stranded together just for wire management purposes, those stranded wires are the track call buttons all placed together. Sorry about that unfocus right there. And there you can also see the behind the scenes of the driver stations that I built. Again, here's your brake, here's your acceleration two-pack. When you combine these two wires together, the reason the car doesn't go anywhere until you pull the trigger is because you are joining these wires when you pull the trigger. That's an oversimplification of the explanation for those of you that want to criticize my explanation about that. But that's the simple way to look at it. So here we are, right? Yellow, red, blue, green. We are done with this guy in red. I may save these. It's not to say that you can't do something worthwhile with them. And by the way, just to be sure, you should check that your IEC, oops, sorry about that on the camera, your IEC cables, I think these are referred like IEC or something like that. I think it's a standard. You should make sure that they're still in good working order. But in this particular case, there's a history with these. We know that it's the diodes, the dials, and other reasons inside of here as to why they fail. So we definitely are dealing with the power supply, and we are not dealing with something as rudimentary, but albeit important as the cord. So we're sliding in our new power supply unit here. We can make these look all pretty again afterwards. Obviously, when you go to get new power supplies, anything that you're doing, always test before you put things in place. I turned this on, of course, and not only did I turn it on, but I checked to see that the fine and the coarse settings work appropriately, going up and down. So we're going to plug back in here. No reason, again, to believe there's anything wrong with our IEC cable here. Joining back on the front side, we will bring over the negative wire. I'm not really thrilled with the way that that is seating, but it's probably bare wire. There's probably bare wire underneath the plastic, and it might not have been on there as far as I would have liked it, but it does serve the purpose, so it's probably needing to be that flexible at this point in time. The only thing I can't tell is why I can't get that any higher. Well, that's as high as it's going to go. That's why. I'm going to reposition quickly. Make sure I can actually do that. I am probably doing a poor job in blocking the camera view. These are not something you want to overcrank. When you attach your leads to any of these power supplies, I'll throw Skytop some love, even though obviously some of the things that I've learned for consistency is that they don't last forever, but I did want to keep consistent power supplies on here, so I did replace with the same brand, Skytop Power here. These are simple, cheap parts. All this is a threaded nut with a plastic cap on top of it. So on the other side, inside of this plastic, is another regular nut holding it on. And if you over tighten this, number one, you could break it. Number two, you're going to start loosening the screw that is traveling through there. And eventually then you're going to take the whole thing apart and fix the nut from the other side. So just once it's in, get it snug. You don't have to make these to the point where you have cranked it down to the, a death grip. And that's it. That is it right there. We changed the power supply. And with ease, we have course control. And when these are brand new, the course adjustment can almost be used exclusively, never mind the fine tuning. You start to get the hang of it, and it really should be nearly impossible for me to miss 9.5 on my own without even using the fine adjustment, or without having the need to use the fine adjustment. And there you go. Of course, I drove past it for a second, but there you go. There you go. That's it. The one thing that I've also noticed is that, and again, there could be some consequence of just the feel of the electricity and how voltage versus amperage works. And if somebody wants to comment on that, by all means, you can see that the blue lane is pulling some amps right now, and that brand new power supply is pulling some amps right now. That's not uncommon for these newer ones that I'm using that I've replaced, and that's fine. Maybe they're feeling a little bit of pull. I have not seen any detrimental effects from that. When you pull the trigger, you can watch the amperage rise, obviously, depending on how much voltage, how much current is traveling through there, and then the amps that your motor and your car pulls in it itself. So little quick behind the scenes, little thing there, just giving you a little rundown and showing you the power supplies and the exchange when you do run into an issue like this. Many folks might inherit a track and then somebody sets it up for them and they might feel overwhelmed, but at the end of the day, as long as you don't have to take apart anything too significantly, you should be able to do maintenance like this. These power supplies are relatively cheap. They're between $40 and $60 a pop, and they're not going to last forever. So hopefully that helps somebody out there. And again, if you like this kind of content, whether it be about the slot cars, whether it be some tuning, or whether it be something about the track or the diorama, help the channel out. Give us a like and share this. Give us some comments and subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you later. That's all for Hobbit Racing for now.
If you don't subscribe to Hobbit Racing, I'll poke you with my staff. Pokey, pokey, pokey.
She will poke you with her staff.
Pokey!